Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 324th episode of Real Hawk Talk. I'm Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger, and it is a fun, celebratory day. And as our special guest asked me, how was your first day at camp, Brian?
Did you make
And
friends?
let me tell you, Stacy, I saw all my friends.
Good.
Like we were playing on the grass. You
Love.
know, everyone was cheering. It was great. It was great. So I mean, there is so much to talk about. And I think as I bring everybody into the show, we've got Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons. We got Nathan Ernst at Nathan E11. And as I just mentioned, Stacy Rost of Seattle Sports 710 AM, very special guest for us today. Could the Seahawks have like saved up? I mean, could they have send us a bone the last month
Oh God.
of something to talk about? And then today, like everything just pow, 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 pow.
Yeah.
Craziness, right, Stacy?
Yeah, I would have absolutely loved while the Mariners were flailing, completely blowing a 10-game lead to have, I don't know, an extension to talk about for Julian Love or I'm not one to ask for too much, I don't think, but maybe another addition, a random free agent signing, like just anything would be stellar. I am so happy. I cannot stress enough how happy I am to have football back in some form. I love baseball, but I started out as a football reporter. I have that feeling of like when fall starts too. Like it's pumpkin spice latte-esque. Like I start getting really excited. I remembered the Hall of Fame game is like 8 days away. So I'm
Oh, wow.
elated. And of course, today, in addition to coming with a ton of news, including good injury news, also comes with a contract extension. So lots to cover.
Yes. So let's recap for folks that are just catching up, that are not as crazy obsessed as me or us, or that's not their job as it is for Stacy. Um, I will cover a couple of things. Jeff, I'm going to hand it off to you to cover some others. News that I've already not broke. News that I've already talked about today that shouldn't be new. The Seahawks did have Connor Williams in. He did pass a physical. It is reported that he is in contract negotiations with the Seahawks. At the time, they said nothing was imminent. Mike McDonald acknowledged they had a, quote, great visit and that he would be a center if he was here. He said if he was here, he would be a center. So that's Connor Williams news. Related to that, Jeff, who's Connor Williams' agent?
The Rosenhaus group, Drew Rosenhaus.
And who else does Drew Rosenhaus represent on the Seattle Seahawks?
Well, Adam Schefter made it very clear. Julian Love.
And what news do we have about our safety, our safety that we love?
Yeah, I feel like I'm entering like a trick question here, but it's not.
Straight ahead, dude. I'm leading you horse to water.
No, it's if you didn't see the news, it was about an hour or so ago. But Julian Love was entering the last year of his deal, and he signed a 3-year extension today. And the news came out after practice. Apparently, he was very happy at practice today, but his agent was in the building today to do the Connor Williams stuff. Julian Love now has a 3-year extension. I think it's 12 million APY before the real money comes out. So I think it's up to 36 million. But yeah, Julian Love has a new deal. And he was a player that there's going to be a lot of eyes on this year. The team has hyped him up. So it's interesting to see him get the extension before the season.
So let's start here, pairing these two bits of news together, as I've decided that they are paired. Stacy, like it seems highly likely Julian Love will have his salary cap reduced for this season. That's the way these things generally work. I think he's an $8 million cap hit on the season. The Seahawks already had $8 million in cap space. This gives them more. It's the same agent as the guy that's in town supposedly negotiating with the team. Do you think that where there's smoke, there's fire with Connor Williams?
1,000%. I think anything in the NFL is always it is always fair to question where nuggets of information come from. It is always fair to question, why a random free agent is in the building and who knows who. I mean, we've done this before with players who played on similar teams before, who are friends with each other, who went to the same college. I always think those questions are fair. even if you were not one to try to, read between the lines and see what's going on. Well, God, you look at the offensive line and you recognize that even if, Connor had a completely different agent, they should be continuing to look for offensive linemen to try to build the best unit they can, because there are so many questions and I have so many concerns about this group, probably more than any other outside of inside linebackers. So I think you're fair in doing it. I think they're still doing some very solid due diligence even without that connection.
Nathan, coming to you. Have you watched much Connor Williams in his time either with the Cowboys or with the Dolphins?
I cannot say that I have watched a ton of Connor Williams now.
So if I told you that Connor Williams was, generally regarded as top 2 or 3 centers in football when he was playing last year, that there's some, I posted some audio from Omar Kelly, who covers the Dolphins, saying that he thought Connor Williams was one of the 10 best offensive linemen at any position last year when he was on the field. If I told you they were like a 87 graded center that you could slide in there, same grade essentially as Frank Ragnow of the Detroit Lions, how does that change the dynamics of that offensive line?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind though is, what's the catch? Wow, sounds too good to be true, Brian. What could go wrong, right? So yeah, if you get a player like that, that's maybe top 5 at his position, no matter it's going to change whatever position group you throw him on. I guess I'd just be, I'm pretty skeptical that they actually get that. But with what they have at center, I thought Olu was okay. And what's Nick Harris? I think it's the backup. Is that right? Sure. Yeah. Throw that kind of potential against the wall and see what you can get out of it. But yeah, count me as skeptical until I actually see him contributing at that level on the field in a Seahawks jersey.
Yeah, well, that's why you're on the show, because I'm too optimistic, and we need somebody who's
somebody needs to rain on the parade every once in a while.
Yeah, someone whose glass is half empty for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So wait a minute, I don't trust him.
Stacey, what do you, if you're Olu Timmy, what do you think this? How do you feel about this news? What do you think the message is that's being sent?
The message that's being sent anytime you're on the offensive line is we need more bodies, especially last year's offensive line. I think that position group, probably more than any other. You carry sometimes 12, 13 guys into a season. No matter what, we're probably going down at some point in the season. Someone else is going to be there to rotate in. And all due respect to Olu, you're not a first-round pick. You're not a second-round pick. You didn't earn the starting job last year. Really nice guy. We've interviewed him a couple times. Good head on his shoulders. I think he's very serious about improving and trying to take ownership over a starting role should he assume that. But that role has not been earned by anyone on this team so far. In fact, I would say that with every single job on that line, with the exception of both tackle spots, which I'm sure we'll talk about right tackle a bit later, but some serious concerns there.
Yes, I do have to throw this out there. Austin Slater says, Stacy Rost is the best thing on 710, always improving and doing an awesome job. Glad you guys have her on. We are also glad to have her on. We're very lucky to have Stacy Rost from Seattle Sports 710. Jeff, got the same question I gave Nathan on this. I think you're maybe a little more familiar with Connor Williams' game. How do you think it would potentially impact that offensive line if he does end up making it onto this squad?
I definitely got a lot more familiar with him just watching Miami last year, and he had a really good year. But as Nathan said, there's a catch. He tore his ACL late in the season, and it's a tough thing to recover from. We saw with Jordan Brooks last year. But to answer your question, Brian, sort of what Stacey alluded to before, they don't have a lot they can hang their hat on. Olu was supposed to be a guy we were excited about. The right tackle situation is unclear. Charles Cross has been okay. Laken Tomlinson was cut by the worst offensive line in the league last year. There's not a lot you can hang your hat on. If Connor Williams can play at the level he did last year, that adds badly needed stability at some spot. That's why me and you wanted them to sign a veteran guard, probably a little more higher ranked than Tomlinson was. But I think that was a huge emphasis for us. And we saw the Rams put so much of their offseason money into that spot. I think they need a reliable thing they can really hang their hat on. And for Olu's side, that's the NFL. Like, people are always trying to replace you with players better, and Stacy said it perfectly. But I think really just to have that kind of upper echelon talent that they can rely on, I think for this group where there's so many questions and they're really trying to just get some stability, which has been just almost a 10-year issue now, they need that. Like, the best year they've really had this offensive line is when they had guys like DJ Fluker and guys like Mike Upati, who really wore down a little bit. But some of the best years that they've had as a group with Dwayne Brown, they had some players like this. There's a lot of young players that need to emerge. So to have like a vet that they can just drop in and play, I think that means a lot.
Well, and I think the thing that gets lost in this is Connor Williams is not 36. He's not 33. He's 27 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so if, Drew Rosenhaus has every reason to be talking out of all sides of his mouth with saying that he's had a miraculous recovery. But I think the reality is the way the Seahawks would structure a contact, they'd have injury-related stipulations in that deal, playing time stipulations. They'd find some ways to protect themselves in the event that he's not up to snuff. But I think it's more worth just thinking about the possibility of it working out than of it not, because as of now, they don't have him. If it does happen, I think it's a pretty tectonic impact to the overall team, not just the line. But Stacy, you mentioned another part of that line where the news was not as optimistic. What was your take? Share for people that didn't hear. What was the kind of update on Abe Lucas, and what was your take on what Mike McDonald said?
So I'll start by adding context before that update, which then made the update a little more ominous to me. And again, we don't know. Everything you always hear is rumor. The only thing official is from the mouth of the head coach or the GM. So, but there was obviously a report from Brady Henderson of ESPN that, hey, in-house, there's a little more confidence that what Abe is working through is maybe not, a debilitating or chronic issue, or that they're a little more optimistic. And then I heard from someone else that there was not internally, but just a rumor that they're actually it wasn't looking good, and that this is something that was pretty concerning to the team. So kind of conflicting reports predated this. So you head into camp and you're thinking, yeah, I'm not, obviously Abe's not going to practice. He's going to be on the PUP list, and you're kind of expecting that. So then when you have what seems like a very benign comment from Mike McDonald, which is, yeah, to be honest, we would have liked to see him progress a little sooner. On its face, that doesn't sound bad at all. When you throw in that there are some conflicting reports about whether or not this is a very serious thing, or whether or not there's optimism he can get back out there quickly, you're suddenly clinging to a throwaway line like, yeah, we kind of wish it would have advanced a little sooner. So I'm much like Nathan, erring on the side of caution, and I'm telling myself to expect that Abe is once again going to be dealing with a serious kind of chronic knee issue heading into camp. Until he is off the PUP list, or until he's out there starting, I'm going to have just kind of like some caution around him, which means watching Fant closely, watching some of those other pieces closely, or looking to a potential signing of Connor, thinking, God, like, solidify one other position so that you don't feel like you've got Charles Cross and then question marks.
Yeah. Nathan, as Stacy mentioned, Abe Lucas was in attendance today, and so that's good. He has been posting videos of him rehabbing. Those things looked promising. Let's assume for a second that this is more ominous, that it could. I think ominous looks like maybe he stays on PUP and misses the first few games of the season. I don't think yet we're in the territory of like, oh, this is super career threatening kind of stuff. I think it's just potentially could take a little longer, but let's go over there. One of the other bits of news that came out today that Mike McDonald talked about, Brady Henderson asked him in the press conference, was that while George Fant is now there to be the backup right tackle and is currently, the number one right tackle, McClendon Curtis also got some snaps at right tackle. He had been starting at right guard throughout OTAs and minicamp, but got snaps at right tackle today. And I got to tell you, I don't know, Stacy, what you thought. I think he looked pretty good. I had no priors on him, maybe a little skeptical even, but I thought he looked, equal to the size of George Fant, which is crazy because George Fant's huge and pretty violent with his hands. So I guess before I go to you, Nathan, did you have any impressions of McClendon Curtis, Stacy, since you were there?
No, not of McClendon Curtis. No, I was just watching, like, is anyone falling on their face? Is kind of how I gauged offensive line play this early in camp. Who's falling on his face? No one. All right.
All right. So Nathan, the question I was going to ask you is, how much of an issue is it if George Fant is the starting right tackle for the Seahawks for some period of time?
Well, I don't think it's an issue at all. Like he's a guy that should be able to step in and play, and hopefully you never really think about him. He's not going to be particularly good, but he's not going to be particularly bad either. Like, you know, we've seen a lot of black holes on this offensive line, black holes in like the Mariners lineup and black holes on the Seahawks offensive line. Like these are the things that Seattle fans have been just dying about for decades now. George Fant shouldn't be that, you know, so if he has to start for a while, I don't think that's any big deal. If McClendon Curtis is starting, I'm a little like, there's definitely a glass half full, glass half empty approach to that.
Sure.
I think I'm a little concerned, but it is exciting. Like he is 24 and, you know, he's a world of potential one way or the other. So, but no, I don't have any concerns. If Fant ends up starting like every game this year, that's not something that massively changes my outlook on the Seahawks this year. Jeff,
what other news am I missing? I mean, Nehemiah Pritchett, DJ James come off. They passed their physicals. They practiced today. Tremaine Ankrum was waived today. I thought that was of note. You know, I can't remember the last time the Seahawks signed a free agent and then cut him before camp. Like, can any of you remember a situation when that's happened? I remember like Antoine Winfield was signed and cut at the end of camp, you know, during like the 2013 season, but this is before he even gets to camp.
Yeah, the only one I could think of was like the Lendale White. That was a blast from the past. Remember that one? Where like Pete, no, they cut him like in like OTAs to like send a message to the team that like Pete has no scholarship players. This was back in like 2010. This is his first year.
His first year, Mike McDonald's first year.
So
symmetry.
I found this one interesting because like when they signed him, like Schneider went on his usual, like, we know more about these offensive line in the building than you do. And like, I thought he was a guy like in contention for like a last roster spot or a backup guard spot. The fact that he didn't even make it to one day of camp and the guy they signed was like a UDFA camp body kind of guard. My first thought was, okay, maybe that's the first step because they're bringing in another offensive lineman who can play guard and center. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting that maybe that sets the table for Connor Williams eventually. That was my thought. But the fact that he didn't make it to day one of camp and before they got Haynes in the draft, he was really like before Tomlinson, one of the only guards they had. And we were all like, who is this guy? So I thought it was pretty alarming. He didn't even make it through camp. I don't know if it was an off-field issue, but yeah, it's really unprecedented going back to like Lendale White, which was more like off-field behavior kind of thing.
For what it's worth, that does save $1 million in cap space. So it's not nothing. I'll happily take that if they don't have anyone else to give it to. But like, I think you said it well, Jeff. Ankrum, to me, the reason that was notable is not because he's some great player, but because he was penciled into the 53. When you sign someone as a free agent, generally that's penciling someone into the 53. So even though the guy they signed, who's not penciled into the 53, basically opened up a spot in the 53-man roster for another backup guard or something else. And who that ends up being, whether it's a Connor Williams comes and takes that spot, whether it's opens up the spot for the rookie like Satao Lamea or Mike Jarrell or, you know, Garrett Greenfield or one of these other guys. I think it bodes well that they thought that they saw something in those guys worth enough that they don't have to deal with Tremaine Ankrum. So I took that generally as a positive. Tracy, I see you nodding your head. Any other thoughts there?
No, I just keep thinking about the shuffling of the offensive line, grasping at straws in the hope that a young player, most especially, I think that in order for this team to be good, they need a surprise. And that feels like such a stupid thing to say, but it's true. We're going to be talking about a name. If they are a good offensive line, it's because we're talking about a name or two in 6 months that we are not mentioning right now. It's the only way they turn this around. So as you're mentioning the names, I'm just mentally going down the roster thinking like, that guy was there. And it's to Nathan's point, it's been such an ongoing issue that it almost feels dated to be talking about it. Like, am I picking at something easy? Is this low hanging fruit? No.
It's like a gray day in June in Seattle. It just is.
Yeah.
Before Nathan, in just a second, I think we'll turn to Patreon questions. And specifically,
we asked for Patreons.
We did.
Okay.
We did. I think we'll pick some out specifically for Stacy at the beginning, at least. So if you can take a look at those. Before we do that, Stacy, obviously you were there today at camp. What jumped out at you? What were the top takeaways?
I was watching the very boring, predictable names on offense. I did not get out to OTAs and mandatory minicamp with the exception of one day, and every reporter was talking about JSN, so I watched a lot of JSN. No surprise, he looks amazing. He looks smooth. I'm so excited for what his season could bring. In particular, the type of receiver he can be in Grub's offense. I think there's a really good fit there. And I was comparing Geno and Sam Howell. I mean, I kind of sometimes gear what I watch over the questions I know we get. So even though for me, I don't think there's a quarterback controversy, I know that we're going to get those questions throughout the next couple of weeks. So I like having notes to be able to say, hey, this guy has this guy doesn't. I thought both quarterbacks had some nice touch today on deep balls. I still think Geno's just a far more advanced passer, and that was only confirmed today. So,
Stacy, I got to jump in there. I think you're being incredibly kind to Sam Howell.
I'm not a mean person.
As someone who's been very supportive of that trade, and is still supportive of that trade, I thought Sam Howell had a very rough day. And I thought he had a very rough day in a few key ways. One of it's just the juxtaposition with Geno. Geno had a very good day, and Geno looked decisive. He was getting rid of the ball quickly. He was getting rid of the ball to open players and delivering the ball. He was on point. He looked good. Yep. And then Sam Howell got out there, and it looked like he was having a contest to see how long he could hold the football before he threw it. Like, he held the ball for a long time. Even when I think he hit Derek Young on a long deep ball. It was a beautiful pass, but Young had been open for about 10 steps. And then Howell found him, and he was wide open enough that he was able to be that late. But I didn't see a lot of on-time passes. I thought I saw a lot of overthrows from him, and I thought I saw just general slow decision making. That's how you end up having 75 sacks or whatever they had last year in Washington. So it was this is like a Grand Canyon between these two guys right now. It's silly to even mention the word competition. Do you think that's true?
No, yes, I do. I mean, it was the one day of mini camp I went to. I was like, even at that camp, Geno threw an interception, and there was still an obvious difference. I guess my expectation is just that Sam is still very much growing. So if you go in thinking that these two are neck and neck, then you're going to very much notice. And I mean, the second they step out onto the field with body type differences, and Sam kind of looking like a fullback out there walking into the middle of the huddle. But I looked at Sam as, okay, this is when they're experimenting, maybe throwing in different guys. So this is when you're like, are we going to have more, little dump off passes to running backs here? Are they going to try to incorporate some different things? Whereas, you get Geno in there and you go, okay, this is when they're testing out chemistry that they're actually going to use during the season. So I watched them differently. But you're not wrong. I mean, when I still see questions about why not put Sam Howell out there? There's 47 answers to that before you even get to talent, the talent gap, but the talent gap is real.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we'll get to some more takeaways, maybe also through the questions. Nathan, if folks have not already, please, give the show a like and click subscribe. Would really appreciate it. It helps other people find the show, grows the community, which is all great. And we're in it now, folks. The season has, started its march with today. And then also go to patreon.com/hawkblogger. join there, get access to the Slack channel, as well as getting a chance to ask us questions each and every week, like Nathan's going to share with us right now.
Yeah, so kick it off. Cindy S wants to know, Stacy, what is your prediction for the Seahawks record this year?
I think a couple other NFC teams got better, so I'm going to be boring and I'm going to go 9 wins and probably shade under. But we had on, we've had on so many people. We've had on Robert Mays, a lot of folks from PFF. I don't think a single person has taken the Seahawks to make it to the playoffs, nor even as a dark horse. Whereas, in the year prior, people were like, oh, let's see what they can do. But almost every single person said, I can't wait to see this season for them. So I'm going to it sounds boring, but copy that as my answer, which is to say, I'm not taking them to go deep into the playoffs. If they're lucky, I think they'll be a wild card, but I think we're going to see very genuine improvement. And this is going to be a team that hopefully, fingers crossed, improves as the year goes on, where we're talking about, what I hope it is like Detroit, when they kind of ousted Green Bay from the playoffs. They had a rough first half to the season, and then they won something like 7 of their last 9 or so. It kind of went on a run where you thought it's clicking, it's just too late. I think that might be what we see with Seattle this year. And then we have a really, really exciting 2025. I hope.
I think that's a good call. I think that'd be encouraging. Brian. Hawks fan Matt Man wants to know, are there any coaches on the Seahawks staff who maybe haven't gotten as much publicity as others that you think could have a big impact on the team? So you can't say Ryan Grubb. You can't say Mike McDonald. Yeah.
And won't say Scott Huff either. Like, those are the 3 obvious ones.
Sure.
There's 2 that kind of come to mind for me. The first is Kennedy Palomalu. I think he is a highly, highly regarded running back coach, and I don't think Kenneth Walker has reached.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you here, Brian. Yeah. He said have an impact on the team.
I picked that for you, Nathan. Stacy, Nathan hates the running game. He thinks it's abhorrent.
Nathan, what? Wait, hang on. Do you hate this running game because of the tools and weapons that they do or don't have, or do you hate running backs?
Neither. I'm sure Kenneth Walker is a delightful human. No, I just don't think that running backs matter, or that the running game is particularly important to winning football games.
Interesting take. Okay.
Anyway,
that's so polite, Stacy.
We don't need to go down this hole.
We've had some very.
I disagree with you, but I'm around a lot of old heads, old football players that have been indoctrinated to disagree with you.
Well, you know who else agrees with you, Stacy? Sean McVay.
Every running back. Sean McVay's on my side.
Who just went on with Robert Mays, had a deep conversation and talked about how critical it is to be able to be effective in all facets of the offense and not just the passing game. That was his big learning from getting schooled by Bill Belichick in the Super Bowl. But Nathan, yes. Jokes aside, I think Kennedy Palomalu is going to have an impact. I think Kenneth Walker has a much higher ceiling than we've been able to see. I think Zach Charbonnet has a lot to offer. I actually liked what I saw from George Halani today. I think that guy looks like he could definitely stick. I think Kenny McIntosh did not jump out to me today, and I would not be shocked if he's a little bit more on the bubble than we're all giving him credit for, but we'll see. Day 1. I also think Justin Hines, defensive line coach from Chicago, I think he's very well regarded. It is an incredibly talented defensive line. You've already got Aden Dirty, who comes from defensive line background. Mike McDonald loves defensive line. I have a feeling Justin Hines is going to potentially be able. I think he's done some good work in Chicago. So those are 2 names I'd throw a little bouquet to.
Shocked that you didn't pick a Harbaugh there.
Yeah, new kickoff rules.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
Way more important than running backs. So
I'll save them for you, Nathan.
I don't think that you're going to have 2 1,000-yard backs. I really don't. But I hope that they do. And just so Nathan will be seething.
I heard you on with Bump about that.
Be over the moon.
Yeah.
I heard you on with Bump about that. I very much disagree with Bump that it would be a bad thing. I think if they get I don't think they will get 2,000-yard backs, but if they had 2,000-yard backs, I don't think it means that Geno and the passing offense is struggling. I think it's actually probably the opposite.
You've got a wide receiver going, I would hate for 2 1,000-yard running backs to take away those targets. So
Yes.
this is ultimately where it's coming from.
Yes.
I do think Lovely Fraser from Detail Oriented, that's a good shout out. I think he could have a really underrated or understated, maybe underpublicized role on the team.
Yes.
Nice shout out. Actually, I just want to shout this out while we're talking about interviews we've been listening to all summer. Leslie Frazier was on with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks.
And Bucky Brooks.
Yeah, highly recommend that listen as well for Seahawks fans if you haven't yet, just because I think Leslie Frazier kind of fell as like a mentor behind the scenes role, but is going to be so hugely influential. And I've learned a lot from that one. So recommend.
And on that interview, Stacy, he had some really high praise for a certain safety who they just signed to a very big
Julian
deal.
Love. Yep. Good time to listen to it if you haven't.
I think Daniel Jeremiah just retweeted Jeff saying that exact thing. Is that right, Jeff?
He did. I heard the same interview as Stacy. I thought it was awesome.
It's good.
Yeah. It was fascinating to hear his role. And when McDonald got hired, I remember we were all like, they really need to hire like someone who's been a head coach before. And the fact that they had the self-awareness to pick him, and I think John Boyle put out a pretty cool story today about how he was the first call when like him and Schneider got through all the interview. And yeah, that interview was awesome. And he's like, Julian Love's the guy you're all going to find out about this year. The team made it pretty obvious now. Yeah,
They did.
Jeff, Amani Waddell wants to know, who is your surprise cut that no one is talking about? And you cannot say Tremaine Ingram.
Oh, we went through these last week, and there's actually not a lot of easy ones. I'm going to go Kobe Bryant. Is that a surprise cut at this point?
I think that qualifies.
So.
Yeah.
I think like if there's someone I can see sort of on the bubble, and he's kind of been that like hybrid. Is he a corner? Is he a safety? He's never really gotten a chance to play outside corner, which was a position in college in Seattle. He was nickel immediately, which he was kind of not sudden enough to do. And then at safety, there's all these other bodies, and they just paid one guy. They're paying Rashawn Jenkins a lot. So if someone who like Brian's guy, Sutherland or Ty Okada, some of those guys can surpass him, it's possible. But I don't see a lot of possible surprise cuts unless I'm reading the situation wrong. Their roster seems pretty clear, and like where there's limitations, they don't have a lot of numbers. Maybe somewhere on the D line. I know we talked about that last week, but yeah, I'll stick with that one.
Could Lakin Tomlinson be a surprise cut? Do they have enough like other guys that could bubble up above him that he just doesn't make it? Or
he would be a surprise. I'll give you that.
Yeah,
but I don't think it's likely.
Who would start at left guard?
Haynes or Bradford. I mean, I guess who are all the guards? They have Haynes, Bradford, and then
Lamea. Rookie. He's a rookie.
Yeah, I guess there's just not even enough depth that he would.
That's what I'm saying.
Stacy, so we talked a lot about Connor Williams. Mike Prescott wants to know, or is asking what's the one roster move, trade, or signing that you'd want the team to make before the season begins? Is it just Connor Williams? Is that the one, or is there something else?
I mean, adding to the offensive line would be a huge one. I don't have such a. If you still had both linebackers hurt, I would say you need to trade for someone. You need to do something, but both were out there today. I know they were doing warm-ups. I was trying to track, Brian, I'm not sure. Did you see them get actual work during drills? Okay. Yeah, so I was just watching that group during drills and then kind of moved on to watching a bunch of offensive stuff. But were they not out there, I'd say, hey, this is starting to become a glaring need day one of camp if you don't have them. But I feel a little reassured about that group. Helps that my expectations are a little low, whereas they are very high for the defensive line to kind of make up for some of that. So I'm not necessarily feeling a trade or pushing for one. I think just continuing to, shore up that offensive line. I'm deeply concerned about the interior and right now about whether or not Abe Lucas is going to start this season for you.
And I'll throw another one to you, Stacy. Evie wants to know, we'll go optimistic route here. Who is going to most exceed their expectations this year? Ryan Grubb or Mike McDonald? Who are we going to be more impressed with than we think we are at the end of this year between those two coaches?
Can I make it a little easier, and then you can also answer the hard one?
Absolutely not.
Who were you most impressed with today, Stacy? Like, did the offense more jump out to you or the defense? And then you can also answer over the course of the season what you think will be more impressive.
Oh God. It's
I don't
hard.
know if you made it easier.
This part of camp's so difficult because defense can't do much of anything. Like there are so many plays where you thought that would be a sack. It's not. So I guess I'd lean towards defense. But it wasn't like an obvious winner to me. Did you have like an obvious side of the ball that won to you today?
I wouldn't say it was obvious. I was more impressed with the offense, maybe because my expectations were just lower for what a first-time NFL OC would do on day one of camp. And you've been to these before where early in camp, even with experienced offensive coordinators, there's a bunch of false starts. There's guys running into each other. There's like passes to like wide open spaces with no people there. Like it's just kind of ugly the first few days, and the defense usually is dominating. I thought today the offense moved the ball quite a bit and had a number of pretty good plays. So like just from my expectations that jumped out, but the defense didn't play bad. The defense played pretty well as well.
I would say to answer the question, this isn't an indictment on McDonald, who I think can do an amazing job. I just think that Ryan Grubb is weirdly being overlooked, and it feels so silly. But if this was still Pete Carroll and you had an offensive coordinator who oversaw a team that was in the national championship, one of the best offenses in college football, that came to the NFL for the very first time, who hadn't been an NFL coordinator, it would be the talk of the town. We'd be talking about it. Every single story would be about Ryan Grubb, because he isn't the only new face, and as not the head coach isn't the most important one. We've kind of glossed over it. But going back to an interview we had also with Robert Mays, who's now dominated so much of this conversation, he went back and watched a lot of Washington tape and felt like Ryan Grubb's offense was more similar to an NFL style offense than what he saw from Waldron. And with Waldron, everything I always heard was when things worked, it looked great. But if things fell apart, you really, really struggled. I know you guys are nodding because you've heard and seen the exact same things. So I think it's understandable, though potentially even a bit dismissive, to say, well, he's going to have some big learning curve because he's coming from college and going to the pros. But he may have an offense that better suits this personnel compared to someone who is coming from an NFL team in Waldron. So I'm actually very optimistic about Grubb. And I think he is going to surprise a lot of people in his first year, because I think that some of these pieces have so much more potential. That includes Geno.
Brian, do you want to answer a question about linebackers, or do you want to answer a question about Charles Cross? Actually, you know what? I take it back. You don't get to choose. Sorry. Since you were at camp today, Colin wants to know, how encouraged are you guys about both linebackers getting medically cleared? I'm curious, what all did they, in addition to that, what all did they do today? Did they look like they were just ready to go, or what was the deal?
There was nothing notable about them today. They were out there, and that was the most notable thing. And I don't know, if you're a Seahawks fan, as much as everybody here is, however many people are watching, you got to be a pretty intense Seahawks fan to be watching this. But it's just a sigh of relief. Like when I saw that they both were cleared, I was like, whew, because it was the exact opposite last week when I saw they were still on PUP after 6 weeks from minicamp. I'm like, Tyrell Dodson wasn't even supposed to have anything serious. It was supposed to be like an ankle twist or something. I'm like, how could he still not have passed his physical? What it really seems like, as far as I can tell, Stacy, let me know if you see it differently, is they got to town like yesterday. They took their physicals and they're past him. So it was like more a matter of where they were. Like there was a requirement to list who was on what list back last week. Then they got to town. They were able to get the doctors to look at them. They're fine. So, I mean, I have always been pretty bullish on the changeover at linebacker. I think that Tyrell Dodson, T-Dot, as all his teammates like to call him, I think is the biggest sleeper on the entire team. This was a guy that for the 8 games that he played last year was the #1 graded linebacker in all the NFL, ahead of Fred Warner. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be better than Fred Warner, but if he's even like half of Fred Warner or half of that grade, like relative to where we've seen, it'd be a huge upgrade over the linebacker play that I think we've seen the last few years for Seattle. So Looking forward to seeing more. Not a lot today, but yeah, I think I remain bullish there. I still think I have my eye on a trade for depth at the end of training camp, where the Seahawks can trade from a position of strength, either edge or corner, maybe, to a team that needs one of those things for an off-ball linebacker that can be a depth player that's better than Patrick O'Connell, that's maybe better than John Radigan. So I still think there's depth need, but starting group I'm pretty good with.
All right, Jeff, you get the Charles Cross question. Trenches, no matter what, asks, what would you need to see this season in order to feel good about picking up the fifth-year option on Cross? I don't think there's much question. Like, do you think that they're even considering not picking up the fifth-year option? I think the bigger question is maybe feel good about a second contract, right? Like, the fifth-year option seems locked in at this point. He hasn't been that bad. No, you don't think so?
I think he's on the borderline, honestly. I don't think he's played at the level where it'd be a sure thing, but it's a new offensive staff, so it's a fresh start. The personnel side might see it a little differently, but I think to answer the question, consistency is a big one. He shows flashes sometimes, but we haven't really seen a period of sustained, like, high-quality play. We've seen okay play in the first year, and then he kind of hit the rookie wall. And I think we need to see him a little better in the run game. I know he's not really, he came from the air raid offense and he was best to be like the best pass protector out of that draft class. And he's been a decent pass protector, but really good rushers have given him trouble. I think just consistency. I think to see some sort of edge in the run game, he has not been a physical. He's way much more of a finesse left tackle. So I think he needs to be a little more consistent. I know when like Brock went down there early in the OTAs, he was talking about how like big and strong he looked. I don't know if Brian had the same take today, but I just think we need to see like a higher level of play, honestly, and it needs to just be at a consistent period of time. And Scott Huff is really working on details. Like everyone's been at camp, whether it's been on Stacy's show or her station, have talked about how good Huff has been on the details, and Cross is someone who can really take a step forward. So this is a huge year to kind of prove it. I think this is a huge year to emphasize, is he worth picking up that fifth-year option?
That's it for Patreon questions.
Awesome. Stacy, important question for you. This is a critical one.
I feel like it's gonna be nacho related, or
it is not. We've done nachos with you before. I want to know: are you team on an airplane? Are you team recline or team never recline? This is a key personality trait question.
Yeah. I think I'm a considerate person, but I am team recline, and I'll tell you why. These seats do not go that far back. Now, I understand that as a person of small stature, I am not affected by chairs in front of me reclining. So I think, good sir, I'm not bothered by this. Surely the person behind me won't be. Now, if I notice the person behind me is, like, my boyfriend is very tall. And so you can see that he's uncomfortable on planes. If I look and I see that someone's uncomfortable behind me, I won't do it. I'll stand on it. I don't think this is the cardinal sin that people make it out to be. We need to stop canceling seat recliners on airplanes. Flights are long. They're uncomfortable. I paid for this ticket. You should recline, pay it forward in the worst way. Recline onto the person behind you. I want to apologize for who I am and what I stand for.
I'm so disappointed. I thought we were like this, and now we're like, I don't know.
I'm sure there's so many other things that I have as redeeming qualities. I recycle most of the time.
I like how long of a pause there was as you tried to think of one of those things.
Think of redeeming qualities. I was like, God, I make everything about myself. I have horrible taste in food and everything else, but. Yeah, I will admit that this is heavily influenced by being very short. Like, never once has anyone reclining affected me, so I didn't realize this was that big of a deal.
I'd be curious what Maura thinks, because I saw the two of you next to each other today. She's got like a good head and a half on you.
Very tall. That we're the opposite end. She's like, I'm like 5'2", 5'3". That's being generous. And she's I'm lying. She's like 5'11". So it's a big gap. Yeah,
there's a big gap there.
Yeah.
Nathan, Jeff, what other questions do you have for Stacy? I know she's got to run here in a little bit, but what other questions do you have for her?
You did just mention questionable food takes. Were you the one that blocked Derek for saying he
Yes.
did or did not like enchiladas? I don't remember. Okay.
Yeah, good question. I thought it was a punishable offense. I think that it's frankly more offensive than a lot of things, but also than leaning seats back. If you have the audacity to say that you don't like, I frankly don't remember what he didn't like. I just know that I blocked him and I never unblocked him.
Enchiladas, I think. Yeah.
I don't think I ever unblocked him, but I think I blocked him for not liking enchiladas, which are delicious, which have never done anything to anyone. I thought it was, this is someone trying to have a hot take, and I thought, I don't think so.
You were completely in the right on that one.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, but no. I will have him blocked for the rest of my life. Yeah,
we support you on that. Actually, you've made a good decision. Jeff, how about you?
Speaking of hot takes or hot food takes, have you come across any of Evan's food takes?
They're atrocious. People give me a hard time. So you get people on the show, and I never mind it because it's just incredibly flattering that anyone takes the time to listen, that they tune in and listen again is like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like that means a ton. So then when they engage, it's like even better. But people kind of latch on to, if Curtis and Bump make fun of me for something, they'll be like, oh, we're going to drag you too. So one of the things that Curtis and Bump and Jake, when he was there, would make fun of me for are food takes, and Brian's made fun of me for them. I don't think I have bad food takes. I think I have opinionated takes on food, but they're not bad. I've seen some of Evan's and they're bad. There's a difference. You know what I mean? Like I have bold food takes. Evan has bad food takes.
Agreed.
So I would just like to say there's a very clear gap there.
There is.
Yeah.
You know, Stacy,
he's Sam.
You mentioned Jake and Bump, and like you've had some really good partners, and you've always built like good chemistry with them. Like what's something with Bump that one you've come to really appreciate about him, like as a co-host, and two, I'm going to give you the other side, which is like what's a take of Bump's that you maybe think is wrong, that you feel like you've got a strong different opinion on?
God, I'll start with that one. What's the last thing we really disagreed on? I mean, we agree on a lot of stuff. So sometimes I try to do the same thing Mike does, which is play devil's advocate just so it's a more interesting conversation. I know there's some college football stuff we've disagreed on before. Oh, I know what it is. He was brought up under old school coaches and appreciates an old school coaching style, whereas I think sometimes an old school coaching style is lost on people. So the example that the last thing where we were like, you're wrong, was when Brian Dable was pissed at Danny Dimes. And he was confronting Daniel Jones and yelling at him and threw his tablet down. And I said, that's not the look. That's not the move. You do nothing to your player. You look like you're falling apart. You're doing whatever. And Bump was like, I don't care. If he's pissing you off, smash the tablet. Like, why are you worried about Daniel Jones' feelings? He's getting $40 million. He should be doing his job. So that's the last thing where we were like coaching styles. He's much more old school than I am with coaching styles. But let me tell you what, listeners, 99% on his side with that one. Even though he is tough and old school, I would say what I appreciate most about Bump is I truly think he's maybe the most empathetic person I've ever met. And it's not that I didn't expect it, but when he would come on the show with Jake and I as a guest, and then later when we started working together, he's just very chill, like he's from LA. So it was this very like chill, low key kind of vibe. He's very funny. He's very smart. And so those were the first things I noticed because they're the most obvious things, but he can truly, like, he is not as quick to anger as almost anyone else I know, as quick to anything else. I think he is so quick to see anyone's point of view, to understand anyone's point of view, and to have a conversation with anyone. And yeah, I find him to be one of the most empathetic people I've ever been around. And I think that if you're going to be an analyst who's always trying to understand what someone's going through and what a player's going through, it's such a valuable gift. So he's amazing there.
It's great. I do enjoy, I'm a regular listener to your show, have been for years. And I can see the eye rolls whenever he makes a golf analogy. And I always do enjoy you and Curtis being annoyed with his. And I also am like listening to Bump because as a tortured golfer, I appreciate what he's going through.
He would talk about golf. Like whenever we have Brady on, he asks Brady golf questions. I'm telling you, if he and Brady could talk golf on air for 30 minutes, they would. And it would just eventually become them talking about their own game to each other, like the most boring conversation. I can't.
Nathan, Jeff, anything else before we let Stacy run?
Which player are you most excited to see with this new coaching staff?
Geno. I think that Geno gets a lot of undue hate. And I think that he can be a top 10 guy in the league. And I think that Geno, Brock Purdy, Matthew Stafford with the Rams, a couple other quarterbacks, whether from different backgrounds or later in their careers, have really changed my perception of what a franchise quarterback can or should look like. And so I am finding myself very open to that perception being challenged. So I'm very eager to see if Geno, well into his 30s, after failing multiple times or being relegated to a backup role, can find a way to excel. And it's also so interesting because he's a very traditional pocket passer. And I feel like being able to exploit that with Grub, should this offensive line take off, could give some really, really interesting options, especially for Nathan, who hates the run game. So they could take off with 3 really good receivers and some solid tight ends.
Yes. Awesome. Hey, that Stacy was fantastic to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening, and we'll obviously love to have you back on later in the season. But man, tell us, if anything, what's coming up on your show that people should tune into.
Well, we are going to be doing player interviews all week at camp. So we just had our first with Uchenna Nwosu, who's wonderful. That's airing tomorrow. No like big insight into the defense, but we asked him a lot about his recovery and his year back and how his off season went. So some fun kind of behind the scenes stuff there. And then otherwise, if you guys tweet at me, we send in player requests every day. So if there's a player you're dying to hear from and you're like, I need to know more from Dodson, or I need to know what Ken Walker's doing, we put in those requests every day. So if I get requests, I add them to the list.
Awesome. Stacy, going to let you go. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Everybody, that is Stacy Jo Rost. You can listen to her every day on Seattle Sports Radio 710 a.m. The Seattle Sports Radio app is another great way to do it. She and Bump are a fantastic pair and always entertaining, mostly about sports, but sometimes not. And that's sometimes the best part. So, Stacy, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, guys. Anytime.
All right. That was Stacy Rost from Seattle Sports Radio 710. Always great, always funny, a breath of fresh air, does not take herself too seriously, and also takes the job very seriously. Does a really great job over there. And as one of the listeners have mentioned, like, she's really put in the time to try to learn things and get better at her job. And I have a ton of respect for her. So thanks to her for joining. Guys, now we can just talk about anything. Like we can be like, we can kind of let our hair down. Nathan, you, I, and Jeff, the long locks, we can just let them flow. What's on your mind? What's on your mind? I mean, we could, if you guys need to run early, that's fine too. But like, I'm fine taking a little extra tonight. It's a big day, a lot of news. What's on your mind?
We didn't talk a lot about this Julian Love extension. I'm curious what is everyone excited about this? What is the take? Like when you saw the deal, the years, the money, what was your immediate reaction to all of it?
Jeff, why don't you go first?
I was surprised at the timing that it happened now, but I figured he'd be the guy that, like, you see him play well and then you hand it out at the end of the year. And the way, like, I always think is like, I think he would have been a perfect guy given the motivation to play his way into that contract. But just from everything you've heard from the team, and that Frazier interview really caught my eye a couple of weeks ago. And out of nowhere, unprompted, he's like, Julian Love is the guy you're going to really learn about. And like, if you watch Griff or Maddie and some of the guys, that they've kind of said the opposite view, where they think he's kind of overrated. And so I'm pretty bullish on Love. I think he's going to be really good in this defense. I'm very aligned with Brian, where I think the safeties on this team are not going to be a weakness like a lot of people think they are. I think it could be a strength. But I was definitely a little surprised at the timing. I don't know if it's connected to something else, but everything I hear, I think the people in the building are really excited about what he can do in this defense. But yeah, I didn't see him as a guy going to get that extension right now for sure.
I was pretty surprised. I mean, I was pretty surprised, and not because I'm actually a pro Julian Love, but why? Why now? That was my big question. Like, you have a year with him. You have new coaches. You have not seen him play in a game yet. You've not seen him perform in your system against competition or even really in pads yet. And yet you are confident enough as a coaching staff that he is going to be like, he's going to be a core part of this team. He's already a starter. They've talked about him a lot, and they just gave him a 3-year, $36 million contract. That's substantial. That's not like some small deal. So that seems like they really think he's going to be a central part of this team. And that's a little surprising to me. What was your reaction, Nathan?
Yeah, I think we'll see what the contract details all break out to, but he's making, just on an APY basis, if you just divide the money by the years, he's making about twice as much as like Geno Stone. And I don't know that he's worth that necessarily. Like, I think I'm a little bit more on the Matty and Griff side of things here. That I think he's a bit overrated, really, at this point, actually. But if you also look at what safeties are maxing out at right now, $12 million is not top of the market, not close to top of the market. And so they're definitely paying him like a guy that is, like you're saying, a core piece of this team. And so they're committing to him, but it almost feels like they're gambling. Like, they kind of, along with their comments, think he would have gotten considerably more than this if they had waited a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of interesting. It feels like a case where Julian Love is, taking the money, and good for him, but he did not necessarily look at that gamble and also think, oh yeah, by the end of the year, I'm getting a lot more than this. And so you almost have him kind of betting against himself and the team betting on him a little bit. I'm sure Julian Love is not thinking of it in those terms. I think the team probably is, that they think that, yeah, they had to commit a bit to get him, but that they think he's going to end up being worth a lot more, and we'll see. So they're definitely gambling on him, committing to him. You think that they probably think they're getting a deal here in the end, and now hopefully they're right.
I mean, long time ago, I made the case that the Seahawks should extend Walter Thurmond before his year where he came in, and I was like, this guy is going to be really good. And I think it was a little bit after he'd already had some play on the field, but I was like, this guy's really good, and they're going to wish they had signed him, and they didn't do it. And ultimately, that could have been because of Thurman's agent. It could have been because the Seahawks didn't think about ahead that way. But I do think there's logic in trying to buy low or buy ahead of the leap in value. But it is a little hard to predict. And Julian Love went from, he was a $6 million a year player, his APY doubled. And looking at the safeties in the league, I mean, we just know what they've reported so far, so this could be significantly different. But the other safeties at $12 million APY are like Jalen Thompson with the Cardinals, who's a very good safety, but I don't think he's not an all pro safety or something like that. But it puts you. I don't know Grant Delpit from the Browns. I'm guessing he's good, but I honestly just don't know him. So he's making $12 million a year. And then you got guys like on the Ravens, like Marcus Williams making $14 million a year. Kyle Duggar for the Patriots making 14.5. Jesse Bates making 16. McKinney making like 16, 17 million. So he's top 10-ish safety. And we just got out of paying safeties a lot of money. So like that's part of where my hesitation is.
Yeah.
Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, that's my thought. But you got to remember, they said the wording, I just reread the tweet. It says up to 36 million. So that's the max he can probably get. And then Schefter reported that this was signed by the agent. So that's coming directly from the agent. So I think 12 million would be a very optimistic guess. I'm very curious what the number was. But yeah, my thought was A, why pay him now? And B, they just made the wise move to shift a lot of the money. They're paying 35 million in dead money rate this year for safety. Like that could buy them a couple good free agents, a bunch of players. And one of the more optimistic thing is they really moved that money around and now they're already investing back there. So I don't love that. But again, if Love takes a step forward in this defense, I'm guessing the number will probably be closer to 9 or 10 a year. It will look fine once the CBA goes up and the money keeps skyrocketing. But yeah, I was a little surprised. I would have liked to see him kind of see what he is for the year, have that full sample size, and then pay him. And if you have to pay him a little more, I don't think the money would have been that different because the safety market's pretty watered down in general. So I think this is them trying to get ahead of what they think of a breakout coming. Would I have done this? Probably not. But again, I need to see the real number. I doubt it'll be 12, but I'm not crazy about it.
What anything more that you guys had on the Love deal? Nathan, I want to bring back to this fifth-year option thing that was a question because I thought that was actually an interesting one. I don't know if this article I'm reading is accurate, but it as of February 23rd, 2024, it gave what the fifth-year options were for different positions, and it looks like there's different like a tiering structure. Like if you've made Pro Bowls and if you've played a certain amount of snaps and that kind of thing. And it looks like, unless I'm mistaken, Charles Cross has not sniffed a Pro Bowl. He has not been an alternate. He has not like got votes probably. So I think the one he qualifies for is tier 3, which is players who have played at least 75% in 2 of their first 3 seasons of the snaps. I think he qualifies for that. So that would be $16 million for the 5th-year option. If you look at the left tackle market in the NFL, that would put him at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That would put him at 10th highest paid left tackle in football. Same amount as Orlando Brown for the Bengals, right below Garrett Bowles for the Broncos, ahead of Taylor Decker for the Lions, ahead of Teron Armstead for the Dolphins, ahead of Ronnie Stanley for the Ravens. I don't know, man. Is that such an obvious thing to do?
I think so. I mean, it's a 1-year thing. Like if we're talking about paying him that over a 5-year deal or something, then yeah, let's look real closely at that. But for a guy with his potential youth, like still not a particularly old player, just pedigree, right? I think, yeah, you probably just eat that 1 year, that 5th year, right? 1 year, 16 million, whatever it happens to be. And, hope he ends up being worth a second contract. I can't imagine. I don't know. It would feel really bad to walk away from Cross like that.
No doubt. No doubt. I don't want that to be the case, but if he played no differently than he's played, I don't know that it's an obvious choice.
Yeah, I would do it, and it would probably not be good, and you maybe end up not getting a second deal, or like whatever his next contract is significantly less than that in aggregate. Yeah. But yeah, if you get the exact same guy at across this year as you got last year, I would still do it just to pay for the potential and the what if of him still, because he has not been while he has been underwhelming. I don't think he's been bad. Like he's been fine. And so if you pay $16 million for 1 year of fine left tackle play with all of the upside that he still has at this point, yeah.
What else? What else is on your mind, guys? And we can take some questions in chat too. I know there's been.
Did JSN do anything cool today?
He did. He caught a number of passes today. One of the things that was cool was the middle of the field was open today, and I think we all kind of noticed with Waldron that didn't seem to be the case a lot of times. And a lot of those passes were going to JSN. And they weren't all just like check down kind of stuff. They were some pretty deep crosses and like finding holes in the defense. And yeah, he looked good, but I got to tell you, the guy that looked really good was DK Metcalf. I you know, that's like, oh, well, DK Metcalf. What are you talking about? He just looked precise, professional, workmanlike, and a handful. He looked really good. It was just one day. He's got the tight cut, no colors. Like, he just looks like he's kind of there for business this year. So with all the talk of JSN, I was definitely keen on him, but DK, I was really impressed with DK today. He looked great.
What about Spoon? Were there any pick sixes, big nickel blitz sacks, anything fun out of him?
No, I mean, he was, lively as usual, but he had one play where he kind of like was demonstrative, thinking that he could have made a play, but it was kind of thrown away. It was nothing special. Nothing of real note today. The guy that actually kind of jumped out a little bit just for Spoon-like energy, not for a play that he made, was Kayvon Wallace. Kayvon Wallace was on the sideline, like whooping up the defense, like let's go D. Like, he was like, you could hear him from across the way. And I don't know if you've heard any of the interviews with Kayvon Wallace. Actually, it just reminds me, I got to put in a request to talk to that guy, because he's pretty entertaining. He's very likable. Like, I'm kind of on the Kayvon Wallace like train. But yeah, nothing jaw dropping from Spoon.
I'm trying to fade the public on this one. I'm still sticking with my take. I see if you can add to this. My take that Tyrese Knight's actually good. Because everyone universally did not like that draft pick, including myself.
Yeah.
So I'm going the other way. Is there any evidence that this might be right, or am I just completely?
Yeah, wrong? I'd say there was nothing like, oh, Jeff, you're gonna make your reputation great on this one. No, but like, one of the ways that I look at linebackers in camp, especially early on, and especially rookie linebackers, you're not wearing pads. So I'm like, run fits. I don't like, whatever. Tackling, you can't really tell. But are they lost in coverage? And that happens a lot for especially young linebackers, but really all linebackers. He was like, on his rotations, he was getting to the receivers. I mean, he wasn't always making the play, but he was there to then finish the play. He seemed pretty decisive and moved well. Nothing that was like, oh my God, this guy's the next great thing. But given that some of his reputation was, he's just a bull in a china shop, he runs like with reckless abandon, and he's always hunting the ball carrier, and he's not necessarily a good pass coverage linebacker. I mean, we got the report out of minicamp. He had like an interception towards one of the last practices, and I thought he looked pretty competent and looks like a good athlete out there. He definitely looks like a different athlete than John Radigan or Patrick O'Connell.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a chance that he is better than, and I also did not like the pick. I did not like him as a player, but just going back and watching like Patrick Queen last year and watching just like at its most basic, like what were they asking him to do a lot? And basically, like with the sim pressure stuff, a lot of times what they want the linebacker to do is to just walk up toward, like after the snap, walk towards the offensive lineman, watch the running back or watch the tight end. And if they stay in, then you blitz and you pressure that offensive lineman. And if they go out, or, if they like release after blocking, then you follow them. And that's not something that's like super complicated. I mean, you have to have some athleticism, obviously. And like, I think Knight is dangerous, attacking, rushing the passer. And so in that kind of really basic role, if that's just kind of what they ask him to do, he could carve out a role for himself and be effective. Is he going to be able to like, do all the stuff that Griff loves to watch Jordan Brooks do? No, that's probably going to be a disaster if that's how they want to play him. I'm guessing that's not how they're going to try to play him though. So I think there's a chance that Knight has a a bigger impact as a rookie this year than I was expecting right off the bat, at least.
I agree. I am cautiously optimistic about that. Before we continue on kind of training camp questions, there is a question from Daddy Dennis here about Trent Williams. We didn't go over this news.
Who is the question from?
Daddy Dennis. Okay. Daddy Dennis. Trent Williams holds out does Trent Williams hold out for all of training camp for the Niners? True or false? For people that don't know the context, Brandon Ayuk reported to 49ers camp, but is not practicing. He was not dressed, so he's holding in. Trent Williams did not report to camp. There had not been previous reports that he was unhappy with his contract, but that has now come to the public attention. He is holding out and getting fined irrevocably by not being there. So the question here from Daddy Dennis, Trent Williams holds out all of training camp for the 49ers. True or false?
If you're going to miss one day, you might as well let it roll, right?
I think that sounds great. Jeff, what about you? True or false?
Trent Williams is the most underpaid player in the league. If he doesn't get a massive extension, he should not step foot in any training camp. I'm gonna say true. I'm gonna say some of the O-line money that's gone up, that guy needs to get paid. They need to pay all their players as much as possible, and anyone who doesn't get paid needs to sit out. And if I was Trent, I'd sit out most of the regular season. So
at least the first, like week 10, right?
Like week 10. We missed the first two Seahawks games. So you hear what I did there? First two Seahawks games, because there'll be a third in the playoffs. So I think false. I wish, but I think that they'll throw him a Big Mac, and they'll put something in his contract, and he'll be there.
The other part of this though is like if he holds out the whole training camp and then shows up week 1, he'll probably still be awesome. Like he feels like the kind of guy that can just like roll in like the morning of the first game, be like, I'm here, I'm starting, and I'm still pretty fucking good.
You remember Big Walt used to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's got that same vibe, right? Like
yeah. I don't worry about his level of play if I'm a Niners fan. I do worry about the potential for injury. To go from nothing to full gameplay. So we'll see. And it is a pretty expensive thing to sit out. Maybe I wouldn't even be surprised, to be honest, if he shows up tomorrow. If like today was a show of force to make sure that everybody knew he was that unhappy, and then tomorrow he goes back to holding in like Ayuk, so he's not paying all this. We'll see. But I don't know, man. 49ers have and Ricky Pearsall out he's on PUP with a hamstring injury. Report came out from what was his name? Coach in Arizona. Used to coach in the NFL. Oh my goodness.
Ken Wisenhunt.
No. This is more recent. This is God, I just retweeted this guy. I'm gonna look at my tweet to find it.
The sheriff.
Okay, it is Herm Edwards.
That Arizona.
Herm Edwards at Arizona State said, I told John Lynch that Pearsall is a guy you have to be careful with. He overworks. He had some hamstring issues when he was with us as well. You have to protect him from himself. All right, then.
Not great.
That dude's such a con artist.
I will take all 49er adversity possible. Like, give it all to me, for sure.
I guarantee you somebody had to remind Herm Edwards that Ricky Pearsall was on his team while he was out. He was so checked out.
Yeah.
I don't believe for a second that Herm Edwards knew who was like on the injury list in like working with no chance that dude. That was anyways. What is the vibe? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. What was your question?
What's the vibe from one day? Like, what's the vibe? What is what's the indication of this team's identity? Is it like roll in the last couple of years of the Pete teams back? Because I mean, it's largely like a large amount of these same guys that are still here. Is it like, are you getting LOB 2012. Like every year we love to do. Oh, this is their 2012, right? This is the Mariners 2001. Like here we like, you know, is it what's the vibe? What is your impression of just what this team is? And
That's such a good question, Nathan. Like, because that was the biggest probably takeaway for me today was the vibe, like the gestalt kind of feeling of what was going on there. And one, I'll you know, hopefully not dash anyone's hopes. There's not enough talent there for it to be LOB level. There just isn't. Like, I don't see these guys, and I'm like, I was watching those training camps, and I'm like, oh, Brandon Browner's a different type of human being. Like Richard Sherman is a different, like they can't do anything against this guy. Earl Thomas, like it was very clear the amount of talent that was just bubbling on that team. That's not what's happening here. So not to say they're bad, but I don't think they're like that. But a couple things kind of stood out to me. One, Mike McDonald's, he's a little bit more conservative than Pete Carroll. And I think just about 99% of the population probably qualifies as that. But little things like new rules this year, fans are not allowed to take any video or photos during practice, period. That's very different, which means also the press, the media is not allowed to, because there used to be this thing where like the media were like, what do you mean we can't take video? Like everyone up on the berm is taking video. We'll just go buy a ticket and sit up on the berm and we'll take video. Like, what are you talking about? So they've made that rule. That's a little bit more close to the vest. I think that if you hear Mike McDonald's press conference, he's pretty tight with details about his players, his team. You know, there's some the kind of more secrecy, a little bit more there. The vibe though was just like rejuvenation. It felt like a spring day. It felt like the staff, like there's a lot of happy people. There was a lot of just like, and I talked to some of the folks that have been there a while that are not frontline people or front office people, but they're like back office people or, admins or people that have been there for decades. And they would say things like, I love Pete Carroll. Like I would never say a bad word about him, but it's just really nice to have like a fresh start. Like it's like Pete, no matter what Pete could have done, he could not have been a fresh start. You just can't do that after 14 years as a, 70 whatever year old. So I think that was kind of the
like a level of expectation, right? Like these guys come in and they can win 6 games and it's not the end of the world. It's not gonna be great, but like every year since the Super Bowl, everyone wanted this team to go back to a Super Bowl. And even though like we knew that wasn't in the cards for most of those years at the end, like that was always the standard. And so like you just it was always over everyone's head, I guess. I'd have to imagine that was something that like this team right now is just not dealing with.
Yeah, I don't think they're dealing with that. And the thing that I will say from a like football specific piece vibe wise, last thing I'll say to your question is Mike McDonald, he has that, he always, first time you hear him talk, you're like, okay, the guy's smart. You get that. But you also get like, he's one of those people that when you're talking to him, like you can see he's evaluating you, like he's into all these details. Like you could just see the wheels turning. And he also is known for his game planning, like his play calling, his stress, his chess kind of acumen as a play caller. This like practice was as crisp, as fast paced, as on the details as I've seen any training camp practice in the last 10, 15 years. And it was their first practice, his first training camp practice. It was Ryan Grubb's first training camp practice. And that gave me like some pretty good vibes. Like if he's already got these guys attending to the details and executing at a high pace, high level with decisiveness and confidence, day one, color me intrigued about what they're going to look like in 3 weeks.
And that that's cool too, because it reinforces a lot of what everyone has been saying about him and why he was a great hire all along. Like, I don't know if you heard the Sean McVay interview about him.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah, McVay had nothing but awesome stuff to say about him. And one of the things that he really harped on was that his guys are just they always know what to do. Like nobody's lost out there. They're always doing the right thing. And he talked about, his ability to like play that chess game and disguise coverages. And, a lot of what I had heard Mike talking about with how he designs his defense is like, hey, what is the stuff that we can get for free? Right. Making it simple on your players and hard on the offense. And so like, it just kind of follows that they're out there and they're able to be crisp and play correct because he's one, thinking about the details, and two, thinking about how you enable your players to do that. Like it's not easy to play football. And it's not easy to play football when you're trying to do all the crazy stuff that he wants them to do. And so I guess maybe you're already seeing that, like, yeah, he's found ways to make this hard on the offense and not hard on his own guys.
That McVay interview got me fired up.
Mm-hmm. I got excited about that.
You can just see him kind of clenching too, like, I don't like that this guy is in the division, and then he kind of like snaps out of it.
But I love to compete.
Yeah, I love going.
I don't like this at all, but I love to compete.
And that's coming from a guy who gave McDonald everything he could handle last year offensively.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that's cool. All right, guys. Anything else before we wrap here? Jeff, any other questions you had or thoughts that are on your mind?
No, I got a lot out of your write up today on the takeaways from camp. Is it hard not to like overcorrect from like things you see from one day from all your takes, or is it just like you're gonna watch these things build slowly and slowly?
I've learned to trust my eyes over the years. Like, not that I'm some pro scout or something, but I generally know what to pay attention to and what to like be dismissive of. Like generally receivers and defensive backs are the people you're going to get the best read on in these kind of situations. I don't really have much of a take on offensive or defense line until I see 1v1s. Hopefully they're going to do 1v1s. Who knows if McDonald's doesn't do that, but hopefully they do. Then I feel that, but there's very few takes that I've had about players even early in camp that I then regretted. And so, yeah, I mean, today it was a little bit different just because everything was new. I mean, it was hard to like narrow your focus. I really just watched a lot of offensive line today just to kind of see what the rotations were and how everyone looked. But no, I feel pretty good about it. I wish there was more today where I was like, oh, this guy looks like a world beater. I didn't see that. It doesn't mean, that he's not there. But like the standout guys today were Geno, DK, JSN. Like those were probably the biggest standout guys. And then I thought that Jaron Reed had a couple nice plays today. I thought Lance Boykin, but talk about a guy that I didn't expect to say his name. He looked really good at corner. And I think he might be a bigger threat to those rookie corners making the roster than I realized. But there's one day, so we'll see. But I thought he looked pretty good. So yeah. Who knows? I can't wait to get back out there and see some more for sure. All right, everybody. I'm going to let Jeff and Nathan go. It has been a long day for Jeff, especially. If you haven't already given this show a like, please do click subscribe. We'd appreciate it. It helps grow the community. Go over to patreon.com/hawkblogger, sign up to get access to the Slack channel where you ask us questions like we did tonight. And also get the audio versions of all the Hawk Blogger mornings and all the emergency pods and all that fun stuff. You also want to subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get notified because I'm going live at all sorts of times during the day now with different updates. You will only get notified if you click the bell. So please do that. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow morning for the next edition of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I'll get into more of my thoughts from day one of camp. We might have a guest, probably not, but we will see, and we'll go from there. Nathan, man, it was great to see you. Thanks for coming on again. Nathan Ernst at Nathan11. Everybody else, have a wonderful night. I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been episode 324 of Real Hawk Talk.